Welcome to the channel Com Analytics. I'm Boris Tizengausen. Today is October 6th, and there are a lot of very interesting and good news stories, which hasn't happened that often lately. So in this episode, one of the largest scale attacks on the Russian Federation in all of history. Refineries, factories, oil terminals, power plants, and more are burning. Russia has indirectly admitted that they are the ones behind the drone flights over Europe. Who would have doubted it? Hundreds of thousands of tons of fuel oil off the coast of Europe. How the Kremlin is blackmailing with an environmental disaster. And Kadyrov held the first stand-up show in Chechnya. This is not a joke. All this and more in today's episode. If this is your first time on this channel, subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. So, Russia has been subjected to the largest Ukrainian drone attack in 6 months. This is what I keep talking about. Russians will receive a painful response for their strikes on Ukraine. If in 2022 and 2023 they bombarded Ukraine with drones and missiles with impunity, trying to deprive us of our energy infrastructure so that Ukraine would be plunged into darkness and freeze, now the response comes quickly and is very unpleasant. And most importantly, it is precise. Well, I won't repeat here about the strikes on oil refineries and the fuel problems, but the issue is becoming more and more serious. And so, last night, a number of extremely unpleasant events occurred for the Russians. First of all, this night the Russians reported that over 250 drones were flying over their territory. Strikes were carried out on occupied Crimea, and some very interesting targets were hit. Very interesting sites. First of all, the attack on the Feodosia oil terminal and the oil depot attached to it. After the strike, the storage tanks caught fire there, and, as they say, things really started moving. One by one, the tanks started to lose their integrity from the heat, and the glow from the fire could be seen for dozens of kilometers. And here is the very moment the oil depot was hit. Let me remind you, this is the largest oil depot in Crimea. It can store, or used to store, up to 250,000 tons of fuel. It supplies both the Navy and the ground forces, and of course civilians also get a share of it. In general, this oil depot has already been attacked once before, and back then they even introduced a state of man-made emergency. But in this case, drones were simply crashing into the tanks at full speed. The local collaborators don't know how to comment. There are still no statements from the local authorities. The highway is closed, there's no gasoline, but hang in there. They already burned about a dozen tanks at this oil depot during the previous attack, and now I think there will be even fewer left. And this terminal is also used for transferring fuel from tank cars into storage tanks, and then it's distributed by transport throughout Crimea. As you can imagine, now another half of the tanks will burn out. In general, the refineries in the area are operating intermittently. There's a severe fuel shortage in the region. On top of that, both the oil terminal and the oil depot have come under attack. Subscribers from Crimea are writing to me saying that the fuel situation is really serious. Nothing like this has happened before. In other words, the previous crisis was nothing compared to this. And it's not just Crimea that's in crisis. It's all across Russia. Today I came across a video from Bisk. That's in the Altai Krai. It's 5,000 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. There are huge lines at gas stations. Soon, half of the gas stations won't be able to dispense fuel because there's simply nothing to sell. They just aren't getting any deliveries. Well, now the occupiers will have to use the Kerch Bridge for transportation. But what are they going to transport? Today, the Tuapse oil refinery was attacked as well. So where are they supposed to bring it from now? So what's going to happen now? Fuel will only be available at certain gas stations. At specific gas stations. Naturally, what does a shortage mean? It means a black market. That's it. Now you can buy fuel there, but it'll be much more expensive, with ration cards for insiders, with special permissions and so on. Prices on the black market will skyrocket like crazy. And I'd also like to say something to the traitors and newcomers. Let me remind you, about 800,000 Russians moved to Crimea after the annexation, wanting to live there. Well, here you go. This is for you. The very same gold-toothed old ladies, the communist grannies who shouted that Putin is the president of peace. The foolish ones who celebrated and burned their Ukrainian passports in Crimea. And then, by the way, they didn't know how to get them back because, of course, they wanted to travel, to go places, to visit. But where are you going to go with that piece of paper? And I think even the most stubborn ones have now noticed that the problems for occupied Crimea are getting more and more serious. It's no coincidence that the Black Sea Fleet was one of the first, well, what was left of it anyway, to run away. I'm from Crimea myself and I closely follow the situation. But when some people comment and write to us saying we'll live without gasoline, everything for victory, you won't. When it's not just without gasoline, but also without electricity like in Belgorod, without water like in Donetsk, and the only money left is for the war, it'll be too late. You won't make it. And now comes another phrase that many of you have already come to love, but that's not all. There was also a strike on a military unit between Yevpatoria and the village of Uyutnoye. The village has become not so cozy for the Russians who had their radar taken out there. And before that, let me remind you, coastal radar stations were also destroyed. In general, there's hysteria in local social media groups because as these radar stations are being knocked out, as the radars are being destroyed, these are essentially the eyes of Crimea's air defense system. Basically, they're writing that Ukraine is creating some windows for subsequent strikes. You see already. They attacked and calmly reached the Feodosia terminal. It's impossible to quickly move air defense radar stations to the western coast of Crimea. There's simply nowhere to get them from. Now, considering the strikes on energy infrastructure and oil refineries in Russia, there are many more sites that need to be protected. And our Ukrainian strike assets are reaching much farther now. So, where do you get air defense systems from? And that's not all. Today, drones visited a strategic plant in Dzержinsk. There's a fire there. The Sverdlov plant, which is one of Russia's largest producers of industrial explosives, detonators, and so on. I checked the map. It's 800 kilometers from the border. So that's no longer a distance for Ukrainian drones, but the strike on this plant, it's extremely important because damage to the Sverdlov plant and its affiliated supply chain means a blow to the production of munitions, artillery shells, aerial bombs, missiles. Even a short-term disruption to this plant's operations has a disproportionately large effect on the front lines. But that's still not all. After the explosions, electricity was cut off in the southern and central parts of Belgorod. And water supply disruptions began as well. Suddenly, the Luch substation also caught fire. The local governor confirmed damage to the power infrastructure and called an emergency meeting. But that's still not all. And in Klintsy in the Bryansk region, a thermal power plant came under missile attack. And all of this happened in just one night. Let me remind you, yes, Russia continues to strike Ukraine, but it has been doing that before as well. And regarding that very same only oil refinery, when I mentioned that something could already be transported to Crimea via the bridge, but the Russians are afraid to haul tankers with explosive, highly flammable materials across the Kerch Bridge. They're afraid. Because remember when the Crimean bridge blew up, one of the explosions, and there was that beautiful picture, that remarkable photo, where tankers on the railway line were burning as well. And so the Russians are afraid of that scenario repeating. So then, where do you transport from if the only oil refinery on the Black Sea coast is burning? That's Rosneft, the Tuapse refinery. Well, what can you do? That's the one from which theoretically you could still haul fuel. And some people also write, that we shouldn't provoke them. Now the Russians will respond to us for our... I beg you, even when not a single drone flew into Russian territory, not a single missile, the Russians were still furiously trying to destroy our energy sector. Remember that story. They don't need a reason. They just want to destroy and break us. And here's an example of how the Russians responded today. They struck a maternity hospital in Sumy with a drone. Thank God no one was hurt, people went down to the shelter, but the strike was deliberately aimed right at the maternity hospital. So what kind of pretext are we even talking about? They attacked us without any reason. Let's start with that. Let's start with the fact that they attacked simply because they don't want Ukraine to exist. That's it. There shouldn't be either Ukraine or Ukrainians. That's all there is to it. And today, The Economist published a remarkable article saying that Ukraine is significantly increasing its strikes on Russia's energy infrastructure and is hitting at the heart of the Russian economy. This deep strike campaign is entering a new phase, and there's some interesting statistics. In 2 months, 85 important targets have been hit, and the potential of the Russian military-industrial complex has been significantly reduced. Strikes on refineries and terminals from Chuvashia to Bashkortostan are truly paralyzing the fuel system of the Russian Federation, and in just 1 month, 16 out of 38 refineries have been hit. And then there's the figure of 40%, which is already well known, meaning that the processing capacity of the Russian oil refining industry has dropped by 40%. The main weapon used for these strikes, as the icons show, are drones that cost about $50,000. Just imagine, a drone costing $50,000 flies 1,500 kilometers and takes out a giant refinery the size of a city, where 1,000 people work and millions of barrels of oil are processed. Just imagine that. And there are even fiercer, heavier, more serious ones. Plus, we're also hitting oil pumping stations. In general, it's all unpleasant for Putin. Yes, of course, they're hitting us too. The recent shelling is proof of that. But they would have done it anyway. They carry out these attacks all the time anyway. Well, it should be noted, when I spoke with one expert, he said that if 50% plus of the oil refining capacity is shut down, it would already cause an acute shortage across the whole country. And there are other kinds of problems as well. They'll have to dump more crude oil on the market, which the refineries won't be able to process. And the market isn't elastic, meaning the demand is already there, the market is saturated. So what needs to be done? They'll have to dump it at rock bottom prices. Sorry for the tautology. Dumping it and selling it off at a huge discount, well, these kinds of issues can't be solved in just a few days. Many contracts are already in place, and they'll have to look for tankers for the shadow fleet. It's a whole chain of major problems. I don't even know how to classify this anymore. Is it already a crisis or just some kind of movement, as they call it? By the way, I suggest that the employees of the few gas stations still operating start wearing Putin-style kokoshniks. After all, that's how you can defeat the West, right? Who knows? Maybe you'll get lucky. Maybe you'll still get gasoline delivered. By the way, it's also interesting how local authorities are explaining the reasons why this fuel mess has landed on their doorstep. Aksionov, the collaborator, for example, said there's no gasoline because it's not being delivered to the gas stations.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
And do you know what some other regional leaders have come to? They're already blaming their own population. They say it's because you're filling up your own canisters, stockpiling, and that's why you're clearing out all the reserves at the gas stations. And why, I wonder, are people stockpiling? What do you think? Well, now for the most important piece of advice, which has become even more relevant now. Very soon, fuel in Russia will become extremely scarce. It will be possible to sell it for much more than it costs now. So, managers of Russian oil depots, drain the fuel from your tanks and cover up the theft with a fire. Burn down your oil depots, big and small, and blame everything on Ukrainian drones. You'll have cash in your pocket and a certificate of appreciation from the SBU after the war. By the way, friends, let me remind you that we are running an important fundraiser for the 101st Brigade to purchase termite ground robotic systems that evacuate our wounded soldiers from the battlefield and transport them to a safe distance. They really help. Medics don't have to risk their lives going out for the soldiers. And their comrades also had a termite come to help. They loaded the soldier onto it, secured him, and it transported him to the medics at a safe distance. It's a very important thing. These systems truly save lives. The 101st Brigade recorded a message for us. Please listen to it.
We, the soldiers of the 101st Security Brigade, are reaching out to Boris Tizengausen and his followers for help. We are very grateful to you for the drones you have previously provided. At present, We are in urgent need of 2 termite ground robotic systems for the rapid and timely evacuation of the wounded from the battlefield, which, in the current situation, will allow us to save their lives. Our units are fighting in the Kostiantynivka direction and in Chasiv Yar. We continue to destroy the enemy and believe in your support. Glory to Ukraine!
So in this case, your donation saves the lives of Ukraine's defenders, for which I always say a huge thank you to you, both from myself and from our fighters. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. There is Privat, there is Mono, and there is PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. I see all of you, and I want to say a huge thank you to everyone. Thank you for your support. And if you haven't seen the fundraiser or the link to it here, here's a QR code. It leads directly to the fundraiser. Now about the drones that have flooded Europe and are flying over military facilities, airports, and not just over military sites. Remember how Russia was the first to rush to deny that the drones that entered Poland were theirs or had anything to do with them? Do you remember? But no one in their right mind feels the need to deny crimes they haven't committed. Lithuania didn't come out and say it wasn't us, right? But these guys rushed to make excuses. And then, as the saying goes, the thief's hat is on fire. The ancient evil in the form of Medvedev suddenly woke up and exposed the whole operation, as they say. He wrote a post saying they were scared and trembling. Trembling, huh? Medvedev's guts are always trembling on Mondays, and not just on Mondays either. So Medvedev has named the goals of the drone raids on Europe. These unknown drones are supposed to clearly demonstrate to the local population the risks of war with Russia. Medvedev stated the following: "The main thing is for the not-so-bright Europeans to feel firsthand what the danger of war is, so that they are afraid and trembling like dumb animals in a herd being driven to the slaughterhouse, so that they soil themselves from fear, anticipating their imminent and painful end," Medvedev wrote in his Telegram channel. I can just imagine Medvedev hungover with a purple face. Everything he breathes on withers like he's a dragon, and he's yelling that they should be afraid and trembling. It just makes me really scared. Such a spiteful little dwarf with a bottle decided to scare everyone. Dr. Evil from AliExpress. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. No mood, no energy. Subscribe to Calm Analytics. At least you'll get a little bit of annoyingly calm content, so go ahead and subscribe. And also, friends, sometimes there are such pleasant moments because we regularly help our soldiers together. Just the other day, I was invited and received this kind of gratitude. But this gratitude, let me show it like this. This gratitude is for all of us. And for me, well, it's always unexpected. And there are some very meaningful words here. So this is gratitude to all of us for what we contribute. For the defense of Ukraine's independence and territorial integrity, and we strengthen the army's defense capabilities. And here are the words written here. Our strength is in the unity of the country. We will win. So friends, first of all, I want to congratulate you on the fact that this is how our soldiers value us. This is from a separate presidential brigade. Well, honestly, it was very nice. Let's get back to that little dwarf with the flask. Does anyone still have any doubts after these posts about whose hands are really behind all this? It's too late now. In other words, it's too late to scare us with these drones. They let loose their combat Pekingese and he croaked something towards Europe. Too late. If only this happened in the first months after the full-scale invasion. Now that would have had an effect. Imagine Russia invades Ukraine from different directions. They come in from Belarus. Who knows where else they might go from Belarus? Poland is right next door. They could rush into Poland from the Kaliningrad region. The Baltic countries are there too. So they throw out a statement, if anyone makes a move, we already have troops stationed in the Leningrad region on the border with the Baltic countries, and so on. And then drones start flying over Europe. You have to admit the effect would have been completely different. And I remember very well that Ukraine was given literally 2 weeks, and that was it. So now it's like 2 weeks and Ukraine will fall. And then they would have pushed further in one go through Transnistria, stirred things up, occupied Moldova, taken it, and then, depending on how things went, they would start digging in. But now this is seen more as an act of desperation, you have to agree, an attempt to put pressure on Europe when even Putin himself doesn't understand how, while keeping up this facade, he can get out of this war. His economy is spiraling faster and faster toward the abyss. The strikes from Ukraine are becoming quite serious and tangible. And just look at the front lines. Where is that much-touted summer-autumn offensive of Putin's? He asked Trump for 50 days, which were supposed to end around September 8th or 9th. What did he accomplish in those 50 days by that deadline? Did he show any success in the offensive? No. In the end, all that the paper rat showed, that's what we call him here, that rat was reciting Putin's poems at the forum, dreaming of some bygone victories like Borodino and so on, and girls in kokoshniks. After those extracurricular readings, it was absolutely clear that his ensemble Kukushechka had already gone off on an unplanned tour. You could see it, he's just lost his mind, just some old man. And one more important piece of news. It might have gone unnoticed if I hadn't been dealing with this issue for quite a while, the shadow fleet. So Putin's shadow fleet has been caught dumping oil into European seas. Tankers from the shadow fleet are dumping oil into European waters, despite sanctions and bans on servicing such vessels. That's according to Politico. And a group of journalists conducted an investigation finding that several incidents have been recorded. And they say that this really could lead to the risk of a large-scale environmental disaster. This issue is very serious. It's yet another form of blackmail, just like drones over airfields, drones over military facilities, and more. Most of the tankers in the Russian Federation's shadow fleet are old rust buckets that often ignore safety regulations and lack proper maintenance. And so, if technically leaks can occur due to the age and poor maintenance of these tankers, cracks, corrosion, and so on, or overloading, there's another aspect. When oil is transferred from ship to ship, sea to sea, while at sea, spills can happen, but there's an even more unpleasant scenario for Europe. When can such spills occur? They can be intentional, and this is a form of environmental blackmail. There's even a term for it, releasing a small amount of oil on purpose to intimidate. If you mess with our shadow fleet tankers and one of them happens to wreck somewhere, your entire Baltic North Sea, your straits, everything will be in trouble. It would be an environmental disaster of unprecedented scale. And just so you don't think we're joking, yes, like the Russians, that's how their fascist thugs behave. So you don't think we're joking, we'll dump a small amount a few times as proof that our intentions are serious. It's like, in movies when a maniac scares the victim, especially in those old action films, he brings out a little knife, makes a small cut, and shows that his intentions are very serious. This is exactly the same thing. We'll dump a little bit of oil, our intentions are serious. In Russia's shadow fleet, typically just two types of tankers are used. One type usually carries 100,000 tons, and the other, usually loaded in a different category called Suezmax. There, it's 150,000, with a maximum loading of 200,000 tons. Just imagine what would happen in the shallow Baltic Sea. A semi-enclosed sea where the traffic is... Just think what would happen if one of these rusty tubs carrying 100,000 or, God forbid, 200,000 tons of oil or fuel breaks down. For example, those two Volga Neft tankers that wrecked in the Kerch Strait together had only 9,000 tons of fuel oil on board. Not 100,000, not 200,000, just 9,000. And they destroyed there a significant part of the Black Sea's waters. Both on their own territory and in the occupied Crimea, they'll be cleaning up that fuel oil for a very long time. So this is what it's about. By the way, one environmental activist broke down over there. Maybe they should assign a new one already. But isn't this exactly the kind of issue that should be addressed? And today, friends, I came across some news. At first, I thought it was some kind of website for, there are those sites where the news is, satirical. Like, it seems real, but it's actually satire. I came across a story about how Kadyrov attended the first stand-up festival in Chechnya named after his father, Kadyrov, the Kadyrov Stand-Up Festival. I just thought, well, I'll check it out of curiosity. Well, you would too, surely. Kadyrov at a stand-up festival. And there's a video of Kadyrov there. It's 4 minutes long. So just so you understand, 3.5 minutes out of 4. Everyone, they're congratulating Kadyrov not even on his birthday, but on his upcoming birthday. All his sons are sitting there in close-up, covered in medals and orders. Some guys come out on stage in leather jackets and caps, and they congratulate Kadyrov. Everyone is congratulating Kadyrov. That's the kind of stand-up festival it is. Honestly, you don't need any stand-up participants at all, I think, just Kadyrov. Just bring Kadyrov out on stage. Ask him to say something off the cuff without a script, to improvise on any topic, or maybe tell a little about his work for which he was awarded the title of academician. That would be real stand-up, I think. Well, friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, subscribe to this channel, and let's support the fundraiser for our soldiers. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. Wishing us all a peaceful day and glory to Ukraine.